Okay, welcome back everyone to Grockit's OGTV GMAT edition. We are going through the 12th edition of the guide to the test, like it says there, and like I always draw the arrow. My name's Jim Jacobson, like it says right there, and I usually draw an arrow, and you are on Grockit.com, where sometimes I draw an arrow there and sometimes I don't. We are finishing up the sentence correction section, and we are finishing up the official guide in terms of the questions that actually have answers. You know, that leaves out the essay questions. But we left off, finished up with question number 88 last time on page 673 in sentence correction. We are getting close to the end. So we're going to pick up this time, still on page 673, with question number 89. And as usual, you should have the book open in front of you to that page because I won't be presenting the, the question on the screen. But I will be reading it so that you can sort of follow along and make sure that I'm doing the right question. I have been known to skip one on occasion. Anyway, number 89. Dirt roads may evoke the bucolic simplicity of another century, but financially strained townships point out that dirt roads cost twice as much as maintaining paved roads. So when you're doing comparisons on the GMAT, one thing to remember is that the things that you're comparing need to be parallel. And in colloquial speech, in everyday speech, there would be no ambiguity at all in question number 89 sentence. You would know exactly what someone meant, but literally what's going on here is that we are comparing dirt roads, the cost of dirt roads, to maintaining paved roads. And you can see the mismatch there. We either need to compare dirt roads or maintaining dirt roads to maintaining paved roads. It sounds like kind of a fine distinction, but there are sentences where it actually could make sense to do something like that. I mean, and actually this one, you could argue that it costs as much to make dirt roads as it costs to maintain paved roads, or vice versa. So, or twice as much, that dirt roads cost twice as much as maintaining paved roads. And so the maintenance versus the creation or the existence is, you know, in a different sentence might even be more confusing. So we need to either have both of them with the maintenance referred to, or get rid of the maintenance and just say dirt roads cost twice as much as paved roads. Choice A, of course, then does not have that equal comparison. Choice B, dirt roads cost twice as much to maintain as paved roads do. So that do is standing in for, so they cost twice as much to maintain as paved roads do to maintain. So there's an ellipsis there. But the do indicates that we are to repeat the verb action, the maintaining action. So choice B actually has a parallelism in the maintenance thing. We'll make parallel lines, or sort of parallel lines. Choice C, maintaining dirt roads cost twice as much as paved roads do. So again, with the do, the ellipsis, we can reinsert to maintain in choice B. In choice C, even though it ends in the word do, we can't put in maintaining. Okay, so again, the ellipsis, this word, a Greek word that means literally a leaving out. Really, you have to be able to replace the exact same word that appeared earlier in the sentence. So while you can say dirt roads cost twice as much to maintain as paved roads do to maintain, choice C, maintaining dirt roads cost twice as much as paved roads do maintaining, it's not parallel, so we can't actually use choice C. Choice D, maintaining dirt roads costs twice as much as it does for paved roads. Well, it has no noun as a referent. You know, it could say that the maintenance of dirt roads costs twice as much as it does for paved roads, but there's no clear referent for it, so choice D is out. Choice E, to maintain dirt roads costs twice as much as for paved roads. And again, we lack parallelism there. It could have said to maintain dirt roads costs twice as much as to maintain paved roads. again, there would be less wordy ways of saying that. We could just say maintaining dirt roads costs twice as much as maintaining paved roads. That would have been okay, but since it's not parallel, it's not correct. Choice B is our answer. Last one, as we say goodbye to page 673, question number 90. Although early soap operas were first aired on evening radio in the 1920s, they had moved to the daytime hours of the 1930s when the evening schedule became overcrowded with comedians and variety shows. Okay, so in terms of what we have here, we have two verbs describing early soap operas. We have the although they were first aired. That's our first clause, and that's our subordinate clause, subordinated by the subordinating conjunction although. Although they were first aired, blah, 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 they had moved. And really, ideally, we would want these two verbs to be parallel. They were aired versus they had moved. So here we have a mismatch of parallelism here. Ideally, we would want to say, although they had first been aired, because again, it's a passive verb. Although they had first been aired in blah, 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 they had moved. Or, although they were first aired, they were moved in the 1930s. Also, the past perfect tense here doesn't make sense, because were aired is the simple past. It's passive, but it's the simple past. But then they had moved actually describes an action that took place more recently than the first action, and yet it's in the past perfect tense, which is the one that's supposed to be further in the past. So two reasons why choice A is naughty. Although early soap operas were first aired on evening radio in the 1920s, they were moved to the daytime hours in the 1930s. So there we have were first aired and were moved. So these weren't parallel. These are. So choice B is an option. Choice C, early soap operas were aired first on evening radio in the 1920s, moving to the daytime hours in the 1930s. Now this one actually, because the first, while there is a main verb in the first clause, although they were aired first on evening radio, having the sentence then move on to say moving to the daytime hours in the 1930s, that leaves us with no main verb for an independent clause in choice C. Also, it's not parallel. So C is out. D, early soap operas were aired first in the evening on 1920s radio. They moved to the daytime hours of the 1930s. So we have the parallelism issue. Were aired, but then they moved. And then choice E, early soap operas aired on evening radio first in the 1980s, 1920s. They were moved to the 1930s in the daytime hours. They were not moved to the 1930s. That's kind of a funny phrase. You don't move something a decade. Also, it has that same parallelism issue. It has aired, but were moved. We want were aired and were moved. So choice B is our answer. Parallel and has the correct tenses, and doesn't have any weird phrases like they were moved to the 1930s. And we can say goodbye to page 673 and say hello, page 674. And in doing so, we will do question number 91. Nobody knows exactly how many languages there are in the world, partly because of the difficulty of distinguishing between a language and the sublanguages or dialects within it, but those who have tried to count typically have found about 5,000. Okay, so one, we can see that there's going to be potentially an issue of idiom, namely between X and Y. I mean, there may not be. This is just the prediction phase. But that's a really common GMAT thing, is if there's, not only, but also, any sort of parallelism construction where you could fill in an x into y. Those are the times to kind of predict that the GMAT might be doing something with that. So we have that. Well, that's the only one I can actually predict just by looking at the question. There obviously are going to be other things differentiating the answer choices, but that's the only one that I can see coming. Choice A does use it correctly, and there may be a less wordy way of describing choice A. So, or the same idea that choice A is trying to describe. Let's see what else we get. We have the difficulty of distinguishing between a language and the sub-languages or dialects within them, with those who have tried counting typically finding. Well, the big issue with choice B is the word them, because it's the difficulty of distinguishing between a language and the sub-languages or dialects within them. So them cannot equal a language, and a language is in the not underlined portion. So we have a noun-pronoun mismatch in choice B. Choice C, difficulty of distinguishing between a language and the sub-languages or dialects within it. Okay, that's good. But those who have tried counting it typically find. Now, it, remember that we have people trying to count the number of languages. If you have people trying to count it, a singular thing, and they're having trouble counting, one, then maybe you need to get smarter people or people who can count higher. It cannot equal languages, so that doesn't make sense for choice C. D, distinguishing between a language or the sub-languages or dialects within them, but those who tried to count them typically found. Well, first off, we have between X or Y, which is naughty. Actually, I should have drawn the line through the or, but anyway, you get the idea. Also, we have that them again. Same thing with choice B. Them can't equal language. So D is out. Choice E, distinguishing between a language or the sub-languages or dialects within them, with those who have tried to count typically finding. So actually, it's exactly the same stuff. Or exactly the same errors with another one introduced with that. Remember, the GMAT doesn't really like if you're describing just other circumstances related to your sentence, they don't really like you to start it with, unless with is being used very literally in a prepositional sense. Anyway, so choice A is our correct answer for number 91, our first one on page 674. Good thing we made it such a good start. Moving onward, forging forward through page 674 onto number 92. The energy source on Voyager 2 is not a nuclear reactor in which atoms are actively broken apart. Rather, a kind of nuclear battery that uses natural radioactive decay to produce power. So remember that the semicolon joins two independent clauses. And an independent clause is something that if you read it on its own, it could stand alone as a sentence with a subject and a verb and no words at the front that make it a subordinate clause. So basically, the thing before the semicolon and the thing after the semicolon need to be able to be read alone as a sentence in order for it to stand. I'll just give it away. The fragment in the second half, rather a kind of nuclear battery that uses natural radioactive decay to produce power. There's no verb there in the second half after the semicolon in choice A. So choice A has a sentence fragment, which is naughty. And anything else with a semicolon is going to be suspect. The other answer that has a semicolon is choice E. Although we actually do have a verb in choice E. So we have a semicolon after a part, but then it says it is that of a kind of nuclear battery that uses natural radioactive decay to produce power. It is that of a kind of nuclear battery is horribly criminally wordy and awkward. So we can eliminate choice E. So even though it wasn't on the basis of the same error, these two have the semicolon, and so I feel comfortable getting rid of both at the same time. So all the rest of them have a comma, so we need to make sure that what it has makes sense. So the sentence is trying to convey a contrast between the energy source on Voyager 2 is not a nuclear reactor. Then there's a little clause that describes what nuclear reactors do, namely have atoms actively broken apart. And then we need a contrast word to show, and all three of our remaining answer choices have the word but, so that's good. So it's not X, but Y. And not X, but Y. That's the idiom we're looking for. So choice B has atoms are actively broken apart, but rather a kind of nuclear battery that uses natural radioactive decay. So it's not a nuclear reactor, but rather a kind of nuclear battery. So choice B has the correct parallelism. Choice C, it's not a nuclear reactor, but rather that of a kind of nuclear battery. It's wordy and awkward for the same reason choice E is bad. It's the that of that makes it a problem. Choice D also actually has the that of in it, which again is not parallel. Sorry for the sirens going by. It's not me, I promise. Choice D also wordy. That of destroys the parallelism that we need, that the GMAT so desperately craves. So choice B, again, not a nuclear reactor, but rather a kind of nuclear battery, as opposed to not a nuclear reactor, but rather that of a kind of nuclear battery. Six, 7, 4, 93. Heating oil prices are expected to be higher this year than last because refiners are paying about $5 a barrel more for crude oil than they were last year. Wow, so two comparisons going on in the same sentence. We have A being, wow, A being higher than B because C more than D. So again, things being compared need to be parallel. We have heating oil prices are expected to be higher this year than last. Okay, so this year higher than last year. Okay, we're comparing years, that's fine. We're comparing prices in those respective time frames. And refiners are paying $5 a barrel more for crude oil than they were last year. Paying more than they were last year. We have to restate the verb were because it's actually the action of paying that's being compared in this comparison. And so we have two prices here and two different prices, two acts of paying here, I guess, two different verbs, paying verbs here. So actually, it does seem to be parallel. There may be a more concise way of saying this, though, because this is still a pretty wordy sentence. Let's check the other answers. Heating oil prices are expected to rise higher this year over last because refiners pay about $5 a barrel for crude oil more than they did. Okay, well, immediately where the word more is jumps out as a problem because, again, more should be right after the amount that it is greater. $5 a barrel more, or $5 more per barrel. The more needs to be much closer to the actual price. Also, it ruins the idiom that we're expecting. The word higher, comparative adjectives or comparative adverbs, when you are making a comparison, you are expecting the word than, not over. And so choice B has the word over, which makes it a problem. Choice C, expectations are for heating oil prices to be higher this year than last year's because refiners are paying about $5 a barrel for crude oil more than they did. So again, we have a problem with the placement of more. And this beginning, expectations are for heating oil prices to be higher. That's just plain wordy. I don't know anyone who talks like that. So, I mean, not that you can base everything on the in fact, depending on with whom you hang out regularly, you maybe shouldn't base anything on the GMAT on what how your friends speak. But I hang out with fairly wordy people, and nobody talks like that. So that's definitely a convoluted and wordy way of saying something. Anyway, choice D. It is the expectation that heating oil prices will be higher for this year over last because refiners are paying about $5 a barrel more for crude oil now than what they were. Okay, so we have it is the expectation. Which is wordy but not grammatically incorrect. But then we also have some extra words in here. That heating oil prices will be higher for this year. You can actually just say heating oil prices will be higher this year. It also has the over problem. Higher this year than last, as opposed to higher this year over last. So and then we have the extra word for. And then later on it says paying about $5 a barrel more for crude oil now than what they were. You can also just say $5 a barrel more for crude oil than they were. So the what is also an extra word. So that's, gosh, 4 reasons to cross off choice D. Choice E, it is expected that heating oil prices will rise higher this year than last year's because refiners pay about $5 a barrel for crude oil more than they did. So once again, a problem with more. We have it is expected, which is not grammatically incorrect, but a little bit convoluted. On its own, it is expected is not naughty, and there are actually correct answer choices. We've actually had some already in the course of the sentence correction section where the right answer does start out with a passive, it is X, So this is not automatically wrong by any reason, but we do have the more active version in choice A. Heating oil prices are expected. So we put the focus on the heating oil prices as opposed to it is expected that heating oil prices. Okay. So again, this is this one anyway is a stylistic issue rather than a grammatical one, and it's one where there's really kind of a gray area. It's really about which of the answer choices is most preferable, not necessarily what's the most correct. Okay, so it is expected. Also, we have a little bit of a problem with parallelism. Heating oil prices will rise higher this year than last year's. We have this year not parallel to last year's. It could have either have said this year's heating oil prices higher than last year's, or heating oil prices will rise higher this year than they were last year. But we can't do this year and last year's. This is also naughty. So choice E is not it. Choice A, even though it felt a little bit wordy, correctly has the placement of the verb more, adverb more, has the correct idiom, higher plus than, and it has the most active version focusing on the heating oil prices as opposed to having something like it is the expectation, expectations are, things like that. Choice A. All right. 6, 7, 4, 9, 4. The recent surge in the number of airplane flights has clogged the nation's air traffic control system to lead to 55% more delays at airports and prompts fears among some officials that safety is being compromised. So, jumping out at me on this one is the issue of the infinitive. Infinitives do a lot of work in the English language. Infinitives being things like to run or to be pleased. I just wanted to give you an active one and a passive one. So those are the infinitives, and they get used for all sorts of things. You use them in as the objects of verbs, like I want to go to the store this afternoon. You use them as to express purpose. He did it to become famous. We use them, let's see, occasionally you can use them as the subject of the sentence, to have a good job is a delight, something like that. However, you can't just throw them in whenever you want to, and there's no reason for there to be infinitives in the sentence as written. So the recent surge has clogged the nation's air traffic control system. What they're trying to say then with what comes after that in the underlined portion is a consequence or a detail of this clogging. And the infinitive is never used for anything like that. What we normally see on the GMAT when we want to describe a consequence, so if we have, main clause, comma, consequence, what we've seen time and again is an ing word, an ing participle here after the comma. So it would be something like, clog the nation's air traffic control systems, leading to 55% more delays and prompting. So that's what we've seen time and again throughout the sentence correction section of the official guide. I just need to be clear here. This is something that the GMAT has regularly done. This is how they want you to do it. So that's my prediction for what the correct answer is going to have. It'll also need to be parallel because we do note that we have two verbs. We have lead. In the original sentence it says to lead, but we have lead to 55% more delays at airports, and prompts. Okay, so whatever those two things are, lead and prompt, they need to be parallel. Okay, so issue was that the infinitive, we expect ing words, and 3, those two things need to be parallel. Choice A has problems, and it's wrong. Choice B, leading to, so choice B starts off exactly the way I predicted that it would, that the correct answer would go. Leading to 55% more delay at airports and prompting. Okay, so actually this looks really good, except 55% more delay. This isn't anything I predicted for the, the issues in the answer choices, but delay is a countable noun. You can count the number of times you are delayed. So more delay, it should actually be more delays. 55% more delays, plural. So choice B, almost right. It had parallel participles, leading and prompting, but it had this count noun error. Choice C, to lead to a 55% increase in delay at airports and prompt. So not parallel, and also there's this infinitive for no reason. Choice D, to lead to an increase of 55% in delays at airports and prompted. Oh my goodness, terribly unparalleled. And wordy, 55%, an increase of 55% in delays. Why would you ever say that? Why would you ever say an increase of 55% as opposed to a 55% increase? I guess to be different, if you're listing a lot of increases, maybe you would phrase it differently just for the sake of variety, but on the GMAT, not going to be right. Choice E, leading to a 55% increase in delays at airports and prompting. Okay, well, that has the parallelism we were after, and it doesn't introduce any crazy new anything. So choice E is our correct answer for number 94. Six, 7, 4, 9, 5. The peaks of a mountain range, acting like rocks in a stream bed, produce ripples in the air flowing over them. The resulting flow pattern with crests and troughs that remain stationary although the air that forms them is moving rapidly are known as standing waves. Okay, well, so this is one with a semicolon, and again, remember we have independent clause before and an independent clause after. So really, we don't really have to pay too much attention to anything after or before the semicolon. We might if there's some kind of pronoun issue or something, but the main everything starts with the resulting flow pattern. So the flow pattern is the subject of our independent clause after the semicolon. The verb that goes with it in the sentence as written is are. The flow pattern are. Obviously that's a problem, and the flow pattern is not changeable, whereas are is. That's clearly an error. We can also get rid of any other answer choices that end in the word are, because are is a plural verb, flow pattern is a singular subject. Choice B, just skimming down to the end of the sentence, has are in it. We can get rid of that. Choice D also ends in are. So we've just, improved our odds of guessing to 50% on the basis of one single word, one that was easy to spot. I should say easy to spot if you're trained to look for this sort of thing. Again, when the GMAT has the subject of its clause, basically, but typically the subject of the sentence, and then they separate it by a bunch of words from its verb, you should always say to yourself, I am worried that they are doing a subject-verb mismatch on me. Double check to make sure that the two go together. You may be able to eliminate large numbers of answer choices on that basis. All right, so between C and E, the resulting flow pattern with crests and troughs that remain stationary although the air that forms them is moving rapidly is known as standing waves. So the flow pattern is known as standing waves, crests and troughs that remain stationary although the air that forms them is moving rapidly. Okay, well, I don't see anything wrong with it other than it's still kind of a mouthful to read. Let's check E. The resulting flow pattern with stationary crests and troughs, although they are formed by rapidly moving air, is known as standing waves. Okay, so the resulting flow pattern, stationary crests and troughs, although they are formed by rapidly moving air. The they in choice E is a little ambiguous. We actually have two plural nouns, stationary crests and troughs. They could refer to both of them or one or the other of them. It would have been clearer perhaps if it said stationary crests and troughs. Actually, the whole although phrase is kind of awkwardly placed. You would oftentimes expect a concessive phrase, something that's saying, although this other thing. The although part is, in those cases when you're, whoops, I have to spell it right. When you're introducing some other fact about something that maybe is a little bit of a concession, like that's why I said it was a concessive thing. But if you're listing some kind of mitigating factor or some kind of contradictory factor with a phrase starting with although, it's usually set off by commas. So it's a little bit strangely placed in choice E and really makes it even more wordy and more of a mouthful than choice C. And again, it also has this kind of ambiguous they. Especially since it's in the although clause, whereas in choice C, which also has them, crests and troughs that remain stationary although the air that forms them is moving rapidly. By having the them postponed, it makes it more likely that it's referring to both of them. The although is the big problem with choice. Oops, the arrow should be there. The although phrase is the big problem in choice E. You would expect it to be set off by commas. Anyway, choice C, correct answer. Okay, 6, 7, 5, 9, 6. One of the primary distinctions between our intelligence with that of other primates may lay not so much in any specific skill, but in our ability to extend knowledge gained in one context to new and different ones. Okay, so in the sentence as written, we have an issue of idiom. Already we've had between X and Y as an idiom being discussed today. This one, in choice A, it says between our intelligence with that of other. So this has between and with, which is a problem. Choice B has between our intelligence with that of other primates. So choice C has between our intelligence and that of other primates may lie, not so much in any specific skill. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't even notice the lie versus lay thing. Lay is one of those bad words in English. So lay, let's see, how do I put this? Lay can be one of two things. There is a verb. No, come back, pen. There we go. There's a verb lie, and there's a verb. There's a lie and a lay. To lie is what's called intransitive, meaning it doesn't have a direct object. So I lie here, and we're talking about the lie as in rest, not as in lie as in tell an untruth. I lie here tired. The verb lay is transitive. It's you putting something else down onto a subject. Lay the box on the table. So lay is a transitive verb. It always has a direct object. It has something that you are laying somewhere. Lying is when you are going to go lie down for a nap or something like that. In everyday speech, people confuse these all the time. I want to say, I want to go lay down. And I want, but technically that's wrong. The thing that makes it even more confusing is that the past tense of lie is lay. So the past tense of I lie here tired, yesterday I lay here tired. That's actually the past tense of lie. So lay, super confusing word in English if you're going to use it correctly. I didn't even. So our let's see. The problem with lay in choice A, and I guess E is the other one that has it. Lay, it could be a past tense, but when you on the GMAT and in English in general, when you are making a statement about what's generally true, when it rains, I get wet, you use the present tense, not the past tense. So you could say that the primary distinction lay not so much in any specific skill, but then you're talking about past tense. And since we're trying to make a statement of general truth of where our intelligence differs from that of primates, you would expect the present tense lie. So choice E has lay in it, which is naughty. Yeah, wow. So, I do go over these questions before I broadcast them. I didn't even notice that before, so that's why I'm marveling a little bit. So that's how deeply embedded the confusion between lie and lay is in everyday speech and even informal speech, that somebody whose job it is to actually describe these differences didn't even see it his first time through. Good story. Anyway, hopefully that one doesn't come up for anyone on the GMAT. And luckily, what does that actually say? Oh, right. Luckily there are other errors in each of the answer choices. They didn't make the only error lie and lay. In choice E, there's also the error, what says one of our primary distinctions of our intelligence to that of other primates. Distinctions to is an incorrect idiom. So between C and D, we have one of the primary distinctions between our intelligence and that of other primates may lie not so much in any specific skill as in our ability to extend knowledge, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's plausible. Choice D, one of the primary distinctions our intelligence has from that of other primates may lie not in any specific skill as in our ability to extend. So actually, it's choice D is interesting and plausible until we get to the word as. It lacks parallelism. Choice D, our intelligence, so the primary distinctions our intelligence has may lie not so much in any specific skill as in our ability. So as in, it doesn't, as doesn't correctly describe the contrast. It should say it may not lie in any specific skill. It would need to say, but in our ability, or may not lie in any specific skill as much as it does in our ability to. So as on its own doesn't it's actually the issue isn't so much that it isn't parallel. It's that it doesn't really give the contrast that we need. Well, I guess it could be parallelism too. Like I said, one of the options here, it may not lie in any specific skill as much as it does in. Contrast and parallelism is what we'll call as in choice D. So choice C is the one that preserves, it correctly uses the idiom for between X and Y, has the correct version of lie, and doesn't introduce any new errors. Okay, page 675, number 97. Unlike Schoenberg's 12-tone system that dominated the music of the post-war period, Bartók founded no school and left behind only a handful of disciples. We've seen this time and again, even in these broadcasts. We have an opening modifying phrase. Again, this one is one of the ones where it's an actual comparison. Unlike X, and what's after the comma is the noun, or the thing that it's being compared to. Unlike X, Y. The issue here is that you need to compare similar things. So yes, you could say a car is unlike its driver, but that's not really saying anything. You should be comparing drivers or whatever. In this particular case then, the underlined phrase is the modifying phrase, or a portion thereof, and the noun that comes after it is not negotiable. So this is a person. So the thing before the comma needs to be a person. The sentence as written is Schoenberg's 12-tone system. A system is not a person. And we can get rid of the answer choice that is comparing Bartók to a system. Any other ones? Choice B has Schoenberg and his 12-tone system. Still got the system. Choice C just has Schoenberg. Choice D has the 12-tone system. And choice E has Schoenberg and the 12-tone system. Wow. We got rid of 4 answer choices on the basis of an inaccurate and non-parallel comparison. These are all not parallel by comparing a system and a person, or just a system, to a person. Choice C must be right. Schoenberg, whose 12-tone system dominated the music of the post-war period. So unlike Schoenberg, whose 12-tone system dominated, Bartók founded no school and left behind only a handful of disciples. Choice C. Sometimes it really will be that easy if you know what you're looking for. This modifying phrase thing, have this one tattooed on your arm. Well, don't actually have it tattooed on your arm. They might kick you out if they see you referring to it during the test. But seriously, modifying phrases, comma, noun, Very, very common throughout the sentence correction section in the official guide, and definitely something to watch out for on the real test. Oh dear, number 98 is a full sentence underline. 675, 98. As frustrating as it is, and I think that these are the most frustrating ones because you have so much to read. You have to read the whole sentence very carefully, and then you have to read every answer choice very carefully in order to maximize your chances of getting it right. Hopefully we'll be able to find some things that make it easier for us to identify wrong answer choices. So choice A, or the original sentence, sorry. Even though Clovis points, spear points with longitudinal grooves chipped into their faces, have been found all over North America, they are named for the New Mexico site where they were first discovered in 1932. So the sentence as written is talking about Clovis points, so that's our subject. Clovis points. And then we have apposition, where we rename and expand on what Clovis points are, spear points with longitudinal grooves chipped onto their faces. Clovis points have been found. And they've been found all over. They've been found all over, so we have kind of opposition here. Though Clovis points have been found all over, they are named for New Mexico. So that actually seems like a correct opposition. Even though they've been found all over the place, they're named for a site in New Mexico. And then we find out a little bit about what are they. They are these spear points, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, choice A, you know, it has several commas and everything in it, but everything seems to flow pretty logically. So let's keep A around as an option for our correct answer. Let's see what happens in the other answer choices. Some of these have got to be obviously wrong. So choice B, although named for the New Mexico site where first discovered in 1932, Clovis points are spear points of longitudinal grooves chipped onto their faces and have been found all over North America. Wow, okay. So first thing that jumps out at me here, so it starts out, although named for the New Mexico site where first discovered. It should be where they were first discovered. So it's elliptical in a weird way. We're missing a they were. And then the opposition in this sentence is that although they are named for New Mexico, Clovis points are spear points of longitudinal grooves. So it's kind of comparing, although they're named for New Mexico, they're actually spear points with longitudinal grooves, which is not a comparison that we're after, especially considering that the choice as written, choice A, is comparing the name compared to where they're found, as opposed to comparing the name to what they are, if that makes sense. It makes more sense that the contrast is between where they're found versus what they're named for, as opposed to what they are compared to what they're named for. Now, if their name had been, you know, rubber baby buggy bumpers, and then they turned out to be hardened spear points, that might be an interesting thing about comparing the name to what they actually are. But since it's named for a place, but they're found all over the place, choice C, in addition to missing this they were thing, it has a weird contrast issue that doesn't make as much sense. Also, they are spear points of longitudinal grooves. The word of there, we would expect with. We would expect they are spear points with longitudinal grooves chipped onto their faces. So lots of reasons choice B is not our buddy. Okay, let's check out C. Named for the New Mexico site where they have been first discovered in 1932, Clovis points, spear points of longitudinal grooves chipped onto the faces, have been found all over North America. So the sentence as the contrast in this one is correct. So we have them named for the site where they were discovered. Clovis points have been found all over North America. There's not really a contrast in this one. It doesn't contrast the naming with where they're found, but it at least has, they're named for this and they're found all over North America. So that part's good. The tense in the first clause, though, named for the New Mexico site where they have been first discovered. The present perfect tense, which is a tense that brings us it's an action that happened in the past but brings us close to or right up to the present, is not appropriate for something that happened in 1932, unless it went from 1932 to the present or something like that. So that alone is enough to ruin choice C. Also, it has spear points of longitudinal grooves as opposed to with. So this is another one with of that bothers me. Those are probably the issues, but that's enough to make choice C not the answer. D, spear points with longitudinal grooves that are chipped onto the faces, Clovis points, even though named for the New Mexico site where first discovered in 1932, but were found all over North America. So there's no verb in this sentence, no main verb. So it's not even a sentence actually, it's a sentence fragment. We have no main verb, we have another they were missing, where they were first discovered in 1932. That but at the end, but were found all over North America. If but weren't there, it would have been fine. Or, well, it wouldn't have been fine, but it wouldn't have been a sentence fragment. And then it's just incredibly awkward. Instead of saying Clovis points, which are spear points with longitudinal grooves that are chipped onto the faces, and it's the faces as opposed to their faces. There makes it clearer that that it's the faces of the spear points. Anyway, so many things wrong with choice D. I don't think we need to go into it too much more. Choice E. While Clovis points are spear points whose faces have longitudinal grooves chipped into them, they have been found all over North America and named for the New Mexico site where they have been first discovered in 1932. Whoa. Okay, so again, we have that present perfect issue with 1932. So while they are spear points, they have been found all over North America. So then this one has another crazy contrast, like choice B did, where really we should be comparing the naming versus the name of the place where they were found versus where they're actually found, as opposed to comparing the name, or in this case, comparing the fact that they're spear points with the fact that they've been found all over North America. Like it incorrectly implies that we should be surprised that spear points have been found all over North America. Choice E, plenty wrong with it. Choice A, the sentence as written, does not introduce any of the many errors that we find in the other four answer choices. And while still wordy, it's very clear what's going on. Okay, one more. Still page 675, number 99. Oh, dang. I meant to look up this guy's name to make sure I pronounced it right. Well, I apologize if anybody is familiar with this person. So, ranked as one of the most important of Europe's young playwrights, Franz Xaver Kreutz has written 40 plays. His works, translated into more than 30 languages, are produced more often than any contemporary German dramatist. Luckily, the part that is underlined doesn't have his name in it, so I don't have to say it incorrectly 5 times. So, the issue here is a comparison at the very end, and there are only 2 words underlined, so that's what we can concentrate on. So his works are produced more often than any contemporary German dramatist. We need to be comparing his works to the works of others. The sentence is comparing his works to any dramatist, and that's naughty. We need to compare works to works. His works are produced more often than those of any other, would be my prediction. That's the normal way you kind of do shorthand for the works of any other dramatist. It could have just as easily been, his works are produced more often than the works of any contemporary German dramatist. You would either say the works or those of. So choice A, incorrect comparison. Choice B, his works are produced more than any other contemporary German dramatist. Okay, once again, we're comparing it to a dramatist rather than a work. His works are produced more often than are any contemporary German dramatist. So are is a problem. Any dramatist is singular, so and we are still making an incorrect comparison here. So C is doubly wrong, not parallel, and it has a subject-verb mismatch. His works are produced more often than those of any other contemporary German dramatist. Okay, that's good. Choice C, his works are produced more often as are those of any. Well, this one has those, which is what we wanted to restate that we're dealing with works, but as. Remember, comparative adjectives and comparative adverbs, more or more often, we expect the word than, not the word as. So the problem with choice E is the word as, which makes it wrong. Choice D is the only option then, and it's the one that was more or less what we predicted. We expected either the word works to be restated or for it to use the word those, which is what choice D does. So, good place to stop. Once again, my name is Jim Jacobson. You've been listening to me go through the GMAT official guide sentence correction section. You've been watching Grockit.com. That's supposed to be an arrow. Wow. Okay. And we've been going through the 12th edition to the guide to the test. Next time we will pick up right on question number 100 on page 675 and do another 10 or 11 questions or so. And I hope to see you then.